We now continue with Smurf.
This happened to me in 1961. It was my first time flying on a Soviet Tu-104. Everyone says it's a miracle of engineering, but it looks like a metal coffin. I get stuck in the middle seat. I can't see outside the window. Neighbor is a nervous academic. He keeps fiddling with a crossword. His hands are shaking. The air is thick with smoke and sweat and something chemical. The engine roars, but there is a grinding underneath the floor. Just the sound of it is putting me on edge. I try to sleep, but every time I close my eyes, I feel like I am falling. I don't know why I'm so nervous. I love flying. I have done this dozens of times. I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong though. Halfway through, my neighbor elbows me. His face is pale and his eyes are wide. I don't know what's wrong with him. He points outside the window. His mouth is moving, but he is not saying anything to me. I can't hear any words coming out of his mouth. He looks like a fish on land, gasping for breath. I feel this really cold sweat, but force myself to look around outside the window. I shit you not, I see a glowing, upside-down saucer, pulsing with sickly green light. There is no sound coming from it that I can hear. There are no markings on the craft. It's just hovering and matching our speed with ease. It doesn't even look like it's trying. I try to rationalize it, but my skin is crawling. I think maybe I just don't have enough sleep, that I'm hallucinating or something. My neighbor whispers to me, "Do you see it?" I nod. My throat is really dry now. I'm really nervous. I tried to convince myself it's a weather balloon or some unknown Soviet aircraft. I thought that maybe they were testing something that we did not know about. But in public view, like this, not likely. Suddenly, the air gets really thick, like breathing through a wet cloth. The lights start to flicker. I hear the engine stutter. Everything just feels wrong. Then it happens. Reality starts to bend in front of my eyes. The length of the cabin starts stretching. I see the seats melt into the floor. It's like some kind of insane trip. My eyes are not making sense. My body feels heavy just watching this. I do not feel in control anymore. I am sucked out of my body, floating above the aisle. I am watching myself scream from up above. I see my neighbor's mouth open at an impossibly wide angle. There is now black smoke pouring out of it. People around me start to dissolve. There is skin peeling off of them in parts and ribbons. Their faces are melting into the seats. Some people have just turned into a pile of ash or goo or liquid. I hear voices speaking, but they are not speaking Russian. I do not recognize the language, but I hear it. I can hear it right in my ear, like someone is pressed up against my skull and just whispering. I don't hear it where I'm floating. I feel it right in my ears below me. I know that doesn't make sense. The whispering in my ear finally turns to Russian, and what I hear whispered is, "You are not supposed to be here." And they whispered this in Russian. It whispered so many other things that I did not understand because they were not in Russian. I tried to move, but my limbs are gone. I look around and I don't have arms anymore. I don't have legs anymore. I'm just stumps. My arms have been replaced by something black, just shadows. I am suddenly slammed back into my body from up above. I am gasping for air. I can't breathe properly. I reached to grab my oxygen mask from the back of my seat, but no matter what I did, I still could not breathe properly. I felt something blocking my lungs, if that makes sense. I could not get any air into myself or out of myself. The cabin is in chaos. The people who have not melted away are clawing at their faces, blood everywhere. The woman in front of me bites off her own finger with her eyes rolled back. The flight attendant is coming running, but she collapses and starts convulsing. I see her eyes are bleeding. My neighbor is gone now. The seat is just completely empty. His crossword is torn in half, and there is blood smeared over his tray. I look down and my hands are covered in scratches that I do not remember making. The windows are now all pitch black. I can't see outside anymore. just a faint glowing shape making movements in thick black smoke. It's like a wall of it surrounding the plane. Someone tries to open up the emergency door and gets tackled by another attendant. I see teeth scatter across the aisle. The air smells like burning hair, burning skin. The captain's voice comes on over the intercom, but it's just wet gurgling noises. It sounds like he is choking on his own blood, and he does not say a single comprehensible word. The lights flicker again. For a split second, I see the aisle crawling with things. These dark shapes with too many limbs and no faces. Then everything just snaps back, all in an instant. The plane lands hard. I hear metal screaming and screeching and sparks flying. Everyone is thrown forward. It's not a crash landing, but a very bumpy one. Soldiers start swarming the plane as soon as we touch down. They are wearing gas masks, they are holding rifles, and they are barking orders at everyone. They are picking people up, grabbing them by the arms, dragging them outside of the plane. People are having their hands zip-tied and being arrested. They are being thrown into the mud, practically thrown down the stairs. I got taken out too. I was escorted by soldiers, put in a vehicle, and I had a blindfold put over my head, and I never saw where we went. When I could next see, I was in a freezing room, and I was being interrogated. The lights were much too bright. They burned. The questions they were asking made no sense. They kept asking me, "What did you see? What did you hear? Did it speak to you?" I tried to answer, but my mouth wouldn't work. My tongue felt split. I didn't have the words to tell them. Nothing even really felt real anymore. I was forced to sign papers that I could barely understand. My hands would not stop shaking every time I had to hold the pen. I was locked in a windowless room for days. The food they gave me was just wet, mushy slop. I wasn't being held in these rooms alone though. There were other people in other rooms. At night I could hear screaming and wailing and begging through the walls. People begging to be let out, to have some kind of explanation. And then all night long just pounding and pounding with someone's hands. I don't know how they didn't break them. I heard someone screaming at one point about the green light. I try to ask the guard what is going on, but he is really evasive. But he ends up telling me that there was an accident. I find out from others that they gouged out their own eyes. No normal person just does that. Another one tries to hang themselves with a bedsheet. The guards end up dragging them away and stopping them. I finally got released, and when I did, I was dumped in a random city and told never to speak of it ever again. I was far away from home with no money, none of my belongings, and no way to contact anyone that I knew. The newspapers were saying nothing. There were no missing persons reports. There was no report about a crash or anything like that, so I guess it was just all in my mind. I don't know. I kind of had a hard time trying to figure out what was real and what was not. I tried to go home when I could eventually get there, but my family were acting strange towards me, like they don't recognize me. They told me they got a visit in the night. They said they are scared to talk to me. I start seeing things in mirrors that I know aren't really there. I see things from the plane, but in my home, in real life. I keep flashing back to that day. I wake up with bruises and scratches and sometimes blood on my pillow, but I can't even tell if it's real. I can't sleep anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I am back on the plane, seeing those same things. But it gets worse before it gets better. Weeks pass. I start having blackouts. I wake up in strange places, with muddy shoes and raw hands, with dirt underneath my fingernails and bruises and scratches. One morning I find a chunk of hair on my pillow, but it is not mine. It is not even the same color. I start having these terrible nightmares that I cannot explain away. I keep hearing that whispering in my dreams, and I think the craft is going to come to my home and take me away. I see the news about a train derailment. I recognize one of the survivors from the flight. The next day, news says they died in the hospital from self-inflicted wounds. I can't reach out to any passengers because I do not know any of them. I don't have any contact details or anything. Nothing was published. so I only have faces, which is not much to go off in a big city, or a big country even. It's insane to me how quickly and easily it was swept underneath the rug with no coverage. I start finding strange objects in my apartment that I do not remember putting there. One night, I wake up to find the neighbor from the plane sitting at the foot of my bed with his mouth open and black smoke pouring out of it. I cannot move or scream. I just watch as he leans in and whispers at me. It's just sleep paralysis is all I can tell myself. I wake up in the bathtub one night in ice cold water and my wrists are bleeding. The hospital says I attempted to take my own life, but I don't even remember. I start seeing the saucer in the sky, even during the day, but no one else can see it. Sometimes I see it reflected in the windows, and sometimes in puddles. Every single time I see it, I lose time. I end up somewhere else I'm not supposed to be, or hours have passed. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Neighbors start to complain about screaming from my apartment at nighttime. I am threatened with eviction. I am told that the smell coming from my room is unbearable, but I don't smell anything. I started losing my teeth. A few of the ones in the back just fell out without any prior pain or any problems. I woke up and they were outside of my mouth. My gums started bleeding a lot too. Doctor told me it was stress and prescribed pills to me. The pills make the dreams worse. I dream of the plane crashing, the metal tearing, bodies flying through the air. I wake up with dirt under my nails once again and mud on my sheets. One night, I wake up standing in the street, completely barefoot. The police pick me up and ask me where I've been. I can't even answer them. I just keep mumbling to myself. I get put into a psychiatric hospital. I don't remember much from this time. I am too dosed up on every drug you can think of. I think I got released after around 6 months, maybe slightly longer. My brain eventually stopped making these things up and I felt a lot better. I had to move back in with my parents. I did not leave my room for years. I had no job for a while, just a useless shut-in. I eventually got over it, and with enough medication, it got shoved into the back of my mind. I think I just learned to repress it, but it comes back in waves. I will have weeks or sometimes a whole month where I cannot sleep and have those horrible nightmares again. I don't have an explanation. I don't have any proof, but I never want to even think about that shit ever again. This story was told to me by an older family member many years ago, and I wrote it down, but I've never fully typed it or posted it anywhere until now. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. Alright, for the sake of X, this is my first encounter with a ghost, most likely a slightly malicious spirit. Probably a poltergeist. In high school, when I was 15, 2 of my buddies came over and we played some video games at my house on a Friday night. The next day, one went to work and did his thing, and the other invited me to his house for the night, as his parents would be gone, and we would have the place to ourselves to play Guitar Hero and real guitars as loud as we wanted to. That day, he warned me that his house was haunted, and I completely and utterly did not believe a word of it, as I had zero belief in spirits walking the earth. I dismissed what he said as an obvious mistake, and assumed the house would be slightly rickety and settling in on itself. Well, that night came along, and my mother dropped me off at his house out in the country, in a place called Mission Valley, where old wars had been fought between Mexico and Texas. The house was of normal size, and was not too old even, maybe built around the 1940s or 1950s. We kicked off the night in his room, playing some multiplayer Guitar Hero alone in his house. There were shoeboxes above his TV on the TV stand, and quite randomly, one fell off and landed on my shins, then on my feet, and then the floor. Ooh, it was a ghost, I said, followed by, nah, it was probably just the fan moving it around. As I looked up at the fan, I realized it was not moving at all, and in that particular moment, I realized just how still it was, not only in the house but outside of it as well. It was like a dead spot for the wind, with stale heat and humidity festering the air. In that moment, an inkling of a theory came to my mind that something was not right about the house, but I dismissed it and carried on. Time went by and, unbeknownst to me, he would be talking on the phone with his girlfriend/friend for a decent chunk of the night, leaving me alone often. He was in his kitchen down the one hall of the house, and I was in his room eating a bit of cake. As I sat there on his bed munching, my gaze landed on the Guitar Hero controller leaning on his TV stand, and quite appropriately, as if it were watching and intensely awaiting my reaction, it moved a solid 2 inches in front of the TV. I shit myself, put down my fork, and got the hell out, in that order. I told my friend what I had seen, and his only words were, "I told you so, dude. I told you before you came." After this, nothing happened for a while. We hung out, watched some TV on the bigger screen in the living room, when suddenly, he said, "What's that smell? Do you smell that?" And then got up and straight bolted for the front door, and I mean he was halfway gone to the damn moon before I realized what he was doing and where he was going and why he was leaving. At this point I was stricken with panic, and my most primal instincts were yelling, telling me to stay the hell out. We stood on his road for a while looking at the house and talking about it. "What the hell was that, man? Why did you run suddenly? It really freaked me out," I said. "I smelled a bad one. I've always heard you can smell a really bad one. It smelled like pure burning garbage, and I knew we had to get out of there." At first I was slightly confused and thought he was joking, that it was all a big joke and there were fishing lines around the room, with him being the maestro behind it all, and that he had just farted and made it seem like a ghost joke. But as the night continued, I would only begin to fathom the monstrosity of a benevolent spirit that wants you to feel fear, wants you to know it is there, and feeds off of this energy as it snowballs out of control. The night continued on. I was paralyzed with fear most of the night, but something was beckoning me to stay. Something inside of me had to know. The strongest thread of curiosity stricken in my head. Just what else could this thing manifest and make happen? We tried watching TV and listening to music to no avail. The TV channel would switch randomly and keep going up and up and up and up, hit 0 and then start over again. Both remotes were visible, for the satellite and the TV, so neither of us pressed anything. The TV was just pure berserk, static and channels galore. Eventually it stopped. My friend got up and looked at the ceiling fan in the living room. He reached up and touched it, and it immediately came to a halt. There was no electricity running through it. It was just moving all along on its own for the past 15 to 30 minutes. The door to his parents' room behind the couch in the living room creaked shut while we were in there, and both of us gave it one glance and quickly resumed watching TV. Back in his room, we both saw a shadow float up behind his guitar amp in the corner of the room and then ever so slowly, silently back down. I was the first to look in that direction, and he then said, "You saw that too, right?" At which point I shit myself for the second time because I thought it was my imagination again. It turns out they do not like to be ignored and will manifest in the corner of your vision, only to silently observe you and then float back away into the ether. Later in the night, my friend is on the house phone with some chick from school, talking about ghosts and stuff. The call gets really messed up. We cannot hear her saying anything. We dismiss it and hang up. A few moments later, on his cell phone, he gets a random call from an all-0 number and then gets a voicemail. The voicemail was a recording of both him and our friend on the house phone, as if the cell phone could have been a third party and recorded it all. The night continued on even more, curiosity controlling me, preventing me from calling home to Mama and just getting out of there. Whatever it was sentient. It knew things. It knew what to do to freak you out the most. My friend said that the night I was there was the worst it had ever been in his entire life, as only 3 or 4 things had happened to him before this night, including a CD sticking to the ceiling that was in his backpack, a beer cap flying around his room, music playing by itself, the same song on the stereo. Set Me Free, Your Heaven's a Lie by Lacuna Coil was on repeat during the night I spent there, all on its own, so creepy, and things happened to his mother as well sometimes. She would feel it lay down in the bed next to her, or try to push her down into the bed harder, at night, to the point of her not breathing right. I showered, and it lifted my wet hair straight up into the air. I'm telling you right now, whether it is my bat shittiness, or whether it was psychokinesis, or whatever it was a sentient thing. My hair stood straight up briefly in the shower, and at that point I nearly broke down. But I just got out of the shower and ran half naked into his room and told him I was through with coming back here. I tried to sleep, but they physically moved the tent-like sheets that were on top of my feet, and I could feel their presence, forever pacing around the bed. Except that the whole thing being touched by something invisible thing was not even the worst that could have happened, or the worst that did happen. You listen to me right now. If there is one thing you take away from my story, it's that you do not point at a damn ghost when you see one. You point. It's like a damn beacon. It's like a vacuum tunnel that draws them into you. It's an open invitation for them to get inside your head and learn what they need to do next. Yeah, I saw one alright. It was white and pretty short, only a few inches above the kitchen counter. I was at the beginning of the hall, 15 feet away from the kitchen, 15 feet away from my friend's open door when I saw it. I pointed in its direction and had a brief realization that I just done completely goofed because something made me aware that it was aware of me being aware. I slowly turned around and walked to his room when, well, what can I say? But the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I felt its malice penetrate the room way too suddenly. I felt it rush at me from beyond the grave, from the kitchen. It was like it ran at me full force in an attempt to do something. Needless to say, I felt this and bolted for his room, where I slammed the door behind me and felt safe for some damn reason. Anyway, that is the scariest moment of my entire life. Do not point at them. A few other minor things happened that night, but only stuff like muffled footsteps when it is silent, and electrical switches being switched off and on. These are not personal stories from me, but a collection of stories I've been privy to. Story 1. When I was a child of elementary school age, I would stay at my grandma's house every weekend. It was my absolute favorite place to be as a kid because, to me, it always seemed completely steeped in strangeness. Grandma was weird. She was a sweet lady who was incredibly spiritual and dabbled in Wicca every so often. I remember she used to do things like wash my hair in rainwater and chant to the full moon. My mom thought she was completely mental, but I loved her and loved staying with her because it made me feel magical. Her house was huge and fairly old, probably around 150 years. I always heard strange noises at night. A child laughing, little footsteps, creaks on the stairs, etc. I was never afraid though. I never felt threatened by these particular spirits. They seemed innocent and never bothered me, so I paid them the same respect. I grew accustomed to the nighttime sounds as I grew older, and even liked hearing them after a while. Both Grandma and I talked about the ghosts, and how cool it was that we were able to experience them firsthand like this. One night though, I had an experience that was not so pleasant. I woke up really late at night and had to pee. The upstairs was in a U-shape, guest room, my grandma's room, and then the bathroom. I was never particularly afraid of the dark or anything, so I never had a problem getting up and using the restroom at night, so I quietly opened my door and started walking toward the bathroom. After a few steps, I started to feel super chilly and like there was someone following me. The vibes I got were not good whatsoever, which was unusual. I suddenly started to get really terrified. My heart was beating out of my chest, but I tried to keep it cool and continued to walk steadily toward the bathroom. I finally got there and opened up the door. On the inside of the bathroom door, there was a full-length mirror. Before I walked into the room, I held my breath and looked into the mirror to see if I could catch a glimpse of what I felt like was following me. A few feet behind me, there was an impossibly dark and fuzzy shadow, sort of in the shape of a cloak, and an extremely pale, expressionless face peering out of it. It felt menacing and angry, and I almost blacked out. I slammed the door as hard as I could and locked it, turning all of the lights on in the bathroom and running the water. I stayed in there for the better part of an hour. When I finally got up the courage to leave, I ran to my grandma's bedroom and slept the rest of the night with her. I never saw the figure again, but I dream about it sometimes, and it still completely terrifies me. Here is the next in the collection. When I was 10 years old, me and my brother enjoyed scaring each other as well as watching scary movies. We lived in an old farmhouse on the city outskirts. One day, we decided to start digging around for treasure. Me being a young kid, and him being a teenage brother that had to oblige. We started at a rose bush near a row of trees to the left of our driveway. I dug for a minute and then we hit something. It was a small tin, enough to fit a loaf of bread in. We took it out and it smelled awful, but decided to put it on the front porch. The next morning, my grandma who lived with us commented that she had seen a woman in a wedding dress the previous night and said she was looking for something. My mom did not really listen to her, but my brother, who always thought the house was haunted, was terrified. We did not think too much of it and just went on with our day. I pretty much forgot about the tin and slept well that night. Unfortunately, my brother did not and started telling our parents about seeing something when he went to the washroom in the night. My dad decided to show us something that would completely throw us over and took out a book that he had. It was an autobiography of the farming family that had lived there previously and ended up moving down the street, had left it there. We were looking at old photos of them and reading an excerpt which detailed the house's construction in the late 1800s. It turns out that it was built for the newly wedded couple who were expecting a baby. This is where it gets creepy. The baby died as stillborn and ended up getting buried where? In a tin underneath the rose bush. My brother and I immediately went and buried it back where it was and promptly never went over there again. The next day, my grandma decided to tell us that she had seen the woman again and she was now holding a baby in her arms. Kind of long, but I hope you enjoyed this very strange event that I will never forget as long as I live. My girlfriend and I just started our adult lives by moving in together. I am 20 and she is 19. One night, we had fallen asleep out in the living room while watching a movie on the couch. I heard something coming from the bathroom in our master bedroom, almost like something had fallen out of the medicine cabinet. I woke my girlfriend up as I got from the couch. She looked at me and smiled. "Where you going, babe?" she said sleepily. I told her I might have heard something, that it was probably nothing, and I just wanted to check on it, and she nodded and dozed back off. She had looked a little off, a little pale, a little sick. That entire situation was just weird. She wasn't usually one to be so happy to be woken up. I shrugged it off and continued to the bedroom with caution, unaware of what had made the noise. When I opened up the door and turned on the lights, my heart sank to my feet. There lay my girlfriend, sleeping peacefully in her bed. I tore the covers off of her. She sat up and cursed me. It was something along the lines of, "What the hell are you doing? Why are the lights on? Can't you see I'm sleeping?" I explained the situation, and she irritably explained that she woke up early in the morning and moved to the bed because it was more comfortable. She shrugged it off, saying I was probably dreaming, and imagined her with me on the couch when I first got off. But it was so vivid, and that did not explain the noise I heard from her room. To this day, I have no idea what happened that night, or who was with me on the couch, but I know what I saw, and I know it was real. This happened to me at my mother's house. My mother and her husband were going to a family member's house overnight for a reunion the next day, and since it was the weekend, my brother was staying with a friend. This was the first time I'd had the house to myself since we had moved in, and I was genuinely excited. I had plans for friends to come over and hang out, but unfortunately they fell through due to something coming up. I spent the evening alone, and finally fell asleep around midnight. All through the night and the early hours of the morning, I had the same dream. A man, though I was unable to distinguish any facial features other than a large toothy smile, was holding a camera to me and taking photos. The flash was incredibly bright and it felt eerie, to say the least. It felt very real, but then again, so do most of my dreams, so I did not get too spooked. However, I woke up constantly through the night with a horrible migraine and also severe nausea. I would vomit several times and tried to take a couple ibuprofen, did not help, and go back to sleep. And every time I went back to sleep, I would have the exact same dream. The man with the camera, everything completely black except his grin illuminated by the light of the camera's flash. Needless to say, I did not get too many hours of sleep that night. When my mother returned in the morning and came into my room to wake me up, I looked horrible, pale and just sickly looking. She asked me why my camera was on the floor. I am usually very tidy and organized with my things, and so this was very unusual for me. I told her I had put it on my nightstand to charge before I went to bed. I told her about the nightmare I experienced all night long, and we were both very shaken by it, but I decided I must have knocked it onto the floor while bolting to the bathroom to vomit. I overlooked it as a scary coincidence. When I got up out of my bed, the camera's battery had died, so I put it on to charge and went to eat breakfast and clean up. I am a photography major, and taking photos is a huge hobby of mine, and typically, it was a large portion of my day. I had a shoot that day, taking senior photos for a girl I used to go to high school with. When I got to the location, I turned on my camera and, of course, it took me right to the display screen, showing the last photo that was taken. I dropped and broke my $500 camera when I saw what the photo was. It was a picture of myself, sleeping,